We're going to call our meeting back to order. Are we ready in the sound room? Good. Okay, good deal. It is 5:05, and this is our mid-year budget amendment. So, Julianne, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. What's brought to you today is the mid-year budget amendment. Although your audit report hasn't been presented yet, we did get those numbers, and because time is of the essence, I went ahead and brought this to you today. The audit report is expected to be presented in presentation mode at the next meeting. However, what the mid-year budget amendment does is true up the projected carry forward or closing balances of each of our funds with the actual carry forward or closing balances with each of our funds. So as you will see in the documents that are provided, it trues up each of the funds to ensure well, it would have ended 24. It is 24. For fiscal year 23.
Right. Okay.
No, I lied to you. It would have ended 23 for
Yep.
fiscal year 23. You're currently in 24. We're building 25.
Right. Good deal. All right, go right ahead.
Some of these figures are including some true-up money for this year, correct? And some funds that we knew we were short, like the health care, we trued it up some because we knew it was short this year and last.
That's correct. Some of these figures for in healthcare is one, Medicaid hospitals is another. That the number projection or expense requirement is released in June of each year by the state. So when they released them, this year's July 1 to June 30th number went up about $300,000, which puts us negative for the remaining quarters of our fiscal year because the state operates on a different fiscal year than we do. So we had to true up that account. Health insurance, and there's a number of other ones that have some minor adjustments to them to fix this year's, what we brought into this year and projected out.
So the state actually operates from July 1 to June 30th.
Yes, that's
So
correct.
it does mess us up a little bit. Anything else you want to explain through here before?
Well,
Talk about the amount, because that has to be part of the document.
yeah, so the total amount is $26,069,325. That's of all funds. And remember, we have to have a balance in governmental finance. So what you do on one side of the house has to match the other. So you'll see the revenue and expenditure lines. Some of what you are seeing as housekeeping, for instance, the $1.25 million that's being transferred out of the general fund and into the water fund, that's a product of an action that the board actually took last July, but due to some accounting applied principles at the finance division, they didn't actually move the money. So on my side of the house, which is budget, we moved the money. And the accounting, because there were no actual expenses, they didn't move the money. So it's not that you're moving twice. You're moving the same set of money 2 times, but you're not doubling that down, if you will. Again, just some housekeeping again. When you look at the fire taxing unit, you start off with a negative $2 million and then a positive 1.8. That was a projection that we were going to not have the fire legislative appropriation closed out by the end of last year. We did get all of those expenses in. So instead of that revenue being captured last year, which we assumed the revenue would, we pulled it forward to this year, so you're going to see it flush, right? So some of this is simply transactions that are going to flush each other out. Again, another example would be in the miscellaneous grant funds. You're seeing us bring in just under $5 million. That is the same principle that we talked about earlier, although that is ARPA money and you did not get any new ARPA money. This is already monies you committed. It's in the 160 fund, and there were no actual expenses related to those ARPA projects in the 405 fund, which is what the projects they're funding. And so you're seeing that transaction happen again. It's not new dollars. It's old existing dollars that on the budget side of the house and the finance side of the house, we simply have to reconcile the way it works. I can answer any additional questions that you may have about any specific
Commissioner Wilkinson?
item.
Did you want to go first?
No, I'm good.
Under Better Place Plan, it looks like, so we have dirt to pay projects and resurfacing projects are the same exact number. Is that a duplicate, or can you explain why that's doubled? And also reserve for contingency, reserve for capital outlay are also the same exact number?
Yes, ma'am. So the Better Place plan, the projected revenue, that number is given from the state, was well under actual revenue. So we ended up taking in $3.7 million more than what was projected by the state and budgeted by the county. When those revenues come in, we applied the same formulaic approach that the board has required in the past. And so of dirt to pave and resurfacing, I think we're averaging just under 68% of the revenues. And so we split them in half. Half of those revenues went to dirt to pave, half of them went to resurfacing. And then the other two were split 50-50 between reserve for contingency and reserve for capital outlay for the board to direct staff as to what and when they would like a BPP project to be executed.
So those are true additional funds to those projects?
Yes,
account
ma'am, it
numbers.
is.
Okay, and then the net is, I know we have reserves for contingency up under the 99 at the beginning. Reserves for contingency, 1,042,175, and then restricted reserves capital outlay. Is that really, that is the actual, I mean, obviously, we didn't get 26 million additional dollars.
Correct.
So could you help us understand where,
Yeah.
what we actually did get?
So in the general fund, you are going to add to real dollars added to reserves, the 7.2, which is the aggregate sum of the reserve for contingency and restricted reserves for capital outlay. That is money added to the general fund. If you continue kind of going down that list, the transportation fund is adding those two balance numbers for reserve for contingency and future projects. An actual $1 million is coming into the transportation fund.
Okay.
So the bottom line dollars for each of those funds that you're seeing is going to be where you add to reserve for contingency or reserves for capital outlay or reserves for future projects. That's reserve real dollars adding to your current reserve balances in the respective funds.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. This is a public hearing, so we'll open up the public. Is the public willing to speak? Any public comments? Please come up really quick. Not really quick, just please come up. That's fine. Just state your name, address, and county for the record, please, and any questions you might have.
Leslie Mullins.
Pull that microphone to you. There you go.
Leslie Mullins, Putnam County. And what else did you want?
Your
Address?
Address, yes.
105 Riverside Way, San Mateo. I had a question because it looked like the dollar amounts asked for in the amendment were very specific, as in the money had already been spent, and that the requested increases were to cover those expenditures. And then my other question was, it looked like close to the 10 million was coming out of reserves. What does that leave in the reserves?
Julianne, it's the opposite, so we'll.
Yeah, I'm going to try to best explain it. So those very specific number amounts is where we true up what we projected the year-end close to be and what the actual is. So you're right. It may be, for instance, the fishing fund balance was $1,053, right? A very specific amount of money.
Yes.
And that happens when we project, when the state gave us projected fishing fund revenues, we plugged that number in, and those revenues fell short by exactly $1,053. So it wasn't an expenditure that went over, it was simply revenues that came in under. And so when we began this year's budget, we assumed to be made whole. When the audited financials came in, we understand that the realized actual revenue is $1,053 short. So in order to correct that projection difference, you deduct $1,053. So it's not, and the fishing fund is a great example because there's not a single dollar spent out of the fishing fund as directed by the board. However, we still have to keep those balances correct. With respect to your question, nothing's coming out of general fund reserves. We're adding to. So the $10 million coming into the general fund is then allocated out as needed in order to true up some of the accounts, and then the rest is being put into reserves, new monies into reserves, in the amount of roughly $7.2 million for the general fund. But to get an aggregate total of what you're putting into the reserves, you'd have to add up each line's additional reserve dollars.
Okay, and so then the balance of the reserves is going to be what?
I
At
do
the
not
end of-
have that for you, but I can get it for you, because remember, we're operating current reserves right now today, and they change as needed, as the board directs staff to do. But in the last budget report or quarterly budget report, we had roughly $11 million in reserves, and we would add this, now we're talking general fund only, because each fund has its own set of reserves, and then you would add this and point to those reserves.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public portion of that. And what do we need to do? Oh, we pass a resolution. So, Commissioners, the chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of resolution number 2024-077, a resolution of the board amending the budget for fiscal year 23-24.
Second.
Got a proper motion, proper second. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. And this meeting is now adjourned.